Story 1. My neighbor is filming my bedroom. What can I do? My neighbor pointed a camera directly at my bedroom window and is recording. What can I do? I spoke to the police and they told me that by law he's allowed to film whatever he wants. Still, I'm sure I have some right to privacy. When the police came to speak to him about the camera, he moved it just a millimeter toward the street. Now, a month later, the camera is again aimed directly at my bedroom window. My house is about 15 meters from his. It's absolutely obvious. The camera is pointed at my windows. He even threatened me when I personally asked him to turn the camera away. He replied, "My house, my rules," and added that he has footage of me allegedly calling him the N-word. I never said that. I just want the camera turned away from my bedroom. I'm also pretty sure he can hear what's happening inside my house. What can I do? Can I install some sort of screen or barrier on my property to block the view? Honestly, that seems like the only option I have. First update, since I last wrote here, things have escalated. In the comments I mentioned that the neighbor is basically using audio harassment to torment us. I started keeping a detailed log of each incident. Date, time, description, and whether I called the police. I called them almost every time. A disturbing pattern started to emerge. He was playing strange sounds at random times every night. After each serious incident, I submitted a written report to the local police department. Eventually, city officials started considering charging him with noise ordinance violations based on my complaints. I brought my 3-page log and 7 signed statements with me and finally got fed up waiting for the police to act. I spent $95 to file paperwork for a restraining order against him. For harassment, I specifically mentioned the camera pointed into my bedroom and the constant noise. He was served the temporary order that very day by local cops. And as you might guess, the noise intensified before the hearing date for the restraining order. I was called to testify in a separate court case for the noise violations. I brought the former owner of our home and the neighbor on the other side as witnesses to his audio insanity. The neighbor didn't show up to court. At that point, he had already racked up $1,250 in fines. His lawyer showed up an hour late, and the judge generously agreed to reschedule the hearing for a month later. I was beyond frustrated. Then came the hearing for the restraining order. Again, the neighbor didn't show, and his lawyer asked for more time to review the case. The judge acted fairly and pointed out that everyone has the right to defend themselves under the First Amendment, so he pushed the hearing out another month. Frustration number 2. In the meantime, the noise continued regularly. We tried our best to record everything on our phones, but it was hard because the sounds were short and random, mostly in the middle of the night. Then came the second court date for the restraining order. Finally, we saw our neighbor walk into the courtroom and sit in the back row. When it was our turn, we presented our journal, the statements, and the videos we had as evidence. His lawyer tried to get our journal thrown out, claiming he hadn't seen it before. The judge basically told him off. The neighbor's only defense was that he worked late and couldn't possibly be awake in the middle of the night to terrorize us and that we were the ones making the noise. We pointed out that he had a camera pointed directly at our house and should have plenty of footage to prove that. The judge granted the order with confidence and ruled, no noise, no cameras pointed at our windows or in our direction at all, and he must stay at least 7.5 meters, 25 feet away from us. He immediately turned the camera away from our bedroom. It was great news. We had finally gotten some peace. Then came the court date for the noise violations. Only his lawyer showed up and reached a plea deal. 1 fine would be paid, no appeals. Our restraining order would remain, and 2 other fines would be dropped. Lame, but whatever, it seemed like things had finally quieted down. Then about a month after the order took effect, it all started again. The noises came back and the camera began slowly turning back toward our bedroom window. This time, police noticed something even more disturbing: a red light blinking inside his tinted window. They shone a flashlight and spotted a lens. Turns out the neighbor had another camera inside his room pointed directly into our bedroom despite the active restraining order and likely even before it was issued. The officers told us to stay calm and not worry, but they were actively working to get a search warrant to confiscate the noise-making devices and remove the cameras because he had violated the court order. The next weekend, the neighbor was arrested. We sat on our porch and watched the cops carry out camera after camera, speakers, megaphones, and all kinds of junk from his house. They told us the room with the camera had 4 feet of soundproof insulation and the front door of his home was completely barricaded. Unfortunately, they only confiscated the equipment, meaning it'll eventually be returned to him. He was released from jail the next day. Since they didn't have a warrant to seize his hard drives, they couldn't charge him with voyeurism even though I asked them to. They even mentioned they saw recordings of me and my husband on his laptop. I'm just glad the noise has stopped, and as far as I know, there are no more hidden cameras. Happy I finally got to share this madness with you. I'm sure it's not over yet. Update: almost a year has passed since we lived through that nightmare with our neighbor. We managed to get a restraining order against him for harassment. That summer, he was arrested for violating the judge's orders, and for a while, he seemed to stop his antics with the cameras and the noises. But something was brewing behind closed doors again. Around the beginning of November, one evening, a police officer knocked on our door. He asked if we had heard any gunshots. We hadn't. He soon mentioned that the call had come from our neighbor. The police knew about our situation but assured us they were required to respond to all reports of gunfire. Honestly, after such a long calm, I wasn't surprised something was starting up again. The next day, a police cruiser parked across from our house. I waited, expecting someone to knock and ask again about the shots. No one came. The officer just sat in the car for over an hour watching our house. The following day, I messaged the officer who had previously worked our case. He responded that our neighbor had been calling 911 every single day, reporting gunfire from our address. By the time I got this reply, a whole week had passed. Every single day, that man would come home from work, eat, go about his evening, and then call 911 to say we were shooting guns. The officer told me he was trying to find out if this could be classified as third-party harassment. Then came the new year. In early January, I contacted the officer again. He replied that the city prosecutor wanted to schedule a phone conference to discuss what to do next. During that call, the prosecutor told me that even that same morning, the neighbor had again called 911, claiming we were firing weapons. They had contacted all our other neighbors to ask if anyone had heard gunfire and to confirm that nothing like that was coming from our side. They also planned to bring charges for harassment and misuse of emergency services. Part of the neighbor's plea deal from his summer arrest had allowed him to avoid jail time if he behaved. Now the authorities were reconsidering that deal. The preliminary hearing came and went, and the case was pushed to the next month. I'm afraid the neighbor will keep stalling this case endlessly. Our restraining order is set to expire soon, and we'll have to go to court again, spend more money again. Everything is starting to feel hopeless all over again. Honestly, the most recent postponement really knocked the wind out of me. All I can do now until I'm called as a witness and a victim is wait. Update 3: remember how I said the city prosecutor seemed fully committed to helping me get this case to the finish line? Well, everything changed. There was supposed to be a second preliminary hearing after the case got postponed. I reached out to the prosecutor to ask why that happened. Turns out he went on an extended leave and handed off the case to someone else. Fine, that happens. I was given contact info for the new prosecutor. I emailed him to ask for any updates. Nothing. 2 weeks passed. I sent 2 messages, 0 response. I even tried contacting the assistant prosecutor. Still nothing. Total silence. To say I'm disappointed would be an understatement. I honestly don't know what to do now. At first, everything was going in the right direction. The original prosecutor seemed dedicated to seeing the case through, and I felt like I was in good hands. Now, I can't even get anyone to reply. This is completely out of the ordinary. Before, anytime I had a question, someone would either call me or at least reply to my emails. In the meantime, my neighbor has started lining garbage bins along the fence. Huge, heavy bins with lids. I have no idea why he's doing it, but it just makes everything feel even more unsettling. I'm seriously at the end of my rope. I just want this all to be over. And now, with even the people who are supposed to help going silent, it's only getting worse. I don't know what to do anymore. Update 4. Well, that's it. The prosecutor called me and said, of course, they don't want to find my neighbor guilty on all charges. Instead of jail time, my neighbor's lawyer is asking for 30 days of house arrest, basically what he's already doing, just sitting at home and not going anywhere. The court hearing was postponed again, now to July. And as bad luck would have it, that's exactly when we're moving to another state. I told the prosecutor we won't be here to Testify. I have no strength or will left to fight this. Thanks everyone for your support. The justice system has let us down. Update 5. Hello everyone. Thanks to all who listened and followed this absurd situation. My neighbor pleaded guilty to 3 out of 19 counts of misuse of emergency services and one other charge, the details of which were never fully explained to me. He is officially banned from speaking to me or my husband or bothering anyone on our property. Additionally, he was ordered to undergo a psychiatric evaluation, which he was supposed to have done at the very start of this whole ordeal. I hope that breaking any of these conditions finally lands him behind bars. Now we have a new dilemma. Today, the neighbor stood outside and looked at our brand new for sale sign, no joke. Maybe it's just paranoia, but my realtor called me and said someone scheduled a house viewing today at PM. We didn't warn him about the neighbor situation because we honestly thought it would end without consequences and the new owners would be protected after the sale, but we decided not to stir trouble and to let the neighbor be the first to break any rules. In fact, we found ourselves in the same situation as the previous owners of the house. We ended up in the same spot as the former homeowners in Washington state because the law does not require sellers to disclose this kind of information. No one told us either. I don't mind that the neighbor wants to buy the house, but the very thought of him wandering through our rooms terrifies me. I understand the realtor will be there to watch, but part of me fears he might try to photograph our things or do something else along those lines. Just thinking about this guy possibly being inside our house is driving me crazy. What should I do? My husband suggested parking nearby and keeping an eye on things. I suggested setting up a hidden camera. Both ideas sound a little crazy, but in this situation, they seem like the only logical ones. I'm just afraid that if I tell the realtor, it might turn into another nightmare. Edited. It wasn't our neighbor who scheduled the viewing, thank God. But now we have a Google Nest smart camera installed, so now we'll know everything. Update 6. After the last court hearing, my neighbor decided to install floodlights aimed over the fence directly into our bedroom window. By this time, we had already sold the house and moved into a temporary apartment while preparing to relocate far away from the old home. He turned on the floodlights every night at PM and they shone right into our bedroom window. Even blackout film couldn't help the light reach the guest room where my mum stayed for a week. The police came, took photos, and drove by several nights in a row to confirm the lights were still on. By the terms of his deal with the prosecutor, the neighbor was forbidden from doing things like this and from continuing to harass us. This will still play a role. I called the police and eventually received a court summons. I had to testify as a witness. The day of the court hearing arrived. The prosecution pushed for jail time, but the neighbor's lawyer requested a delay, claiming he hadn't had time to review new information. The delay was granted. A week later, we came to a special hearing with a temporary judge. That was a mistake. Today was the hearing, and for the second time, my husband and I took time off work to attend. The judge immediately told the prosecutor that since he didn't have an official written brief on the case, he didn't know anything and wouldn't hear the case. Usually, the city judge is aware of the situation. The temporary prosecutor objected, saying a written brief isn't actually mandatory and that the case had been on the docket for a while. But the judge said since no specific charges had been filed and they were just asking to reinstate jail time previously dropped, he didn't see the point in hearing the case. He read the terms of the deal and said the phrase "such action" seemed too vague and should be removed. He didn't understand how shining lights onto our property was connected to the earlier charges against the neighbor. Then he added that he had a hearing in Saddle in 2 hours and wasn't going to listen to my testimony today. And since we were moving soon, by his logic, we could no longer be harassed. Case closed. I broke down crying out of complete despair. The prosecutor said I was no longer required to be a witness and that they would discuss the case with the permanent judge. She asked me to stay in touch. When my neighbor left the courtroom, he theatrically raised his hands as if he already knew he had won again. I give up once more. We're moving, it's over. I will never get to speak in court. I will never know what I did to make this man deny me peace. I will never get back the 2 years of my life I lost. Edited. The only bright spot in all this is the police report we got after the summer raid on his house. It turns out this guy is a sexual deviant, even by the standards of very tolerant and liberal Washington state. Story 2. My son is afraid of his room. Why? I'm on the edge. My son suddenly started refusing to go into his room and won't say why. We moved into a new house about a year ago so that our son, who will turn 4 next month, would have his own room. We thought the move would be hard for him, but he immediately got used to his room and had no problems. He loved his room, all his toys were there. Bedtime was easy. Usually he'd fall asleep after a couple of stories and a kiss on the head. He has night lights and we always leave the door open. Although he never said he was afraid of the dark, everything changed on July 4th. He spent most of the day playing in his room, even refusing to come downstairs. But that night and every night since, he absolutely refuses to enter his room and insists on sleeping only in our room. He won't go in even if we take his hand. If he does manage to go in for a second to grab a toy, he doesn't go far and immediately runs back to the hallway. At the same time, he calmly takes baths in the bathroom across the hall, but insists the bathroom door be closed. Then he runs from there to our bedroom. We've tried every way possible to find out why he won't go in his room, but he either starts yelling cowboy hat or muffin or giggles and starts naming every animal he can think of. We think he might have had a nightmare, but he spent the whole day calmly in his room before that. We never figured it out. So now I sleep in his room and he shares a bed with my husband. Maybe I just want to hear if someone else has experienced something like this with their child and can give advice. Or maybe I just want to vent because I miss my own bed. Edited. Thanks so much for your advice, ideas, and stories. It seems I might have solved the mystery, but now I have to figure out what to do about it. Today around PM, I went into my son's room to grab something and clearly heard something running on the roof, probably a squirrel. We have a metal roof and open ceiling beams, so even rain sounds very loud, but I had never heard animals before. This might explain why my son sometimes starts naming animals. If I'm right, now I need to figure out what to do. Current comments. I think he's either scared or ashamed. Maybe it's the fireworks like many say, or some silly thing. Hopefully not a ghost. Maybe he pooped in the closet, had an accident, got sick, broke or spilled something. Have you fully checked the room just in case? Author, I feel like he's more scared than ashamed. I sleep in his room every night and have checked every corner. Nothing unusual. I don't think it's the fireworks. There were none that day when he was calmly playing in his room. Also, he loves fireworks. We spent the whole evening outside watching them. I tried to make the room as cozy as possible, especially during bath time. Then he sometimes peeks at his room out of the corner of his eye, but still turns away and runs. A few times, I got him to take 2 steps inside and grab a specific toy he wanted, but then he ran away right after. Update 1 month later, exactly. A month later, I finally understood everything. I was busy, but really wanted to share this update because I'm still excited. My son is back in his room. A few days ago, I managed to interest him with his toys. He even went into the room though, reluctantly. Then I took the opportunity to point at objects in the room and he had a huge reaction to a Marvel poster that had hung above his bed since we moved in for a whole year. He dashed to our bedroom and hid under the blanket. I took down the poster and walked with it to the hallway near our bedroom and showed it to him. He was terrified when he saw I was holding it. I told him I was throwing it in the trash and he would never see it again. I hid it downstairs to dispose of later, then went back upstairs and told him it was gone. He immediately jumped out of our bed, ran down the hallway to his room and joyfully shouted, "The evil face is gone." Then he happily started jumping all over his bed, pushed my pillow aside, put his Mario one in its place, and snuggled in. I was so happy. We played together. With all his toys that he missed, he slept in his room that night and has been spending more and more time there playing by himself every evening since. He keeps saying there's no more evil face and the room is fun now. For those interested, it was a Marvel poster with over 100 heroes and villains. He could name even the rarest characters. My husband is a comics fan and passed that knowledge on to our son. I don't know exactly who scared him, but I guess it was either MODOK or Ego, the living planet. I didn't ask him to specify which exact villain was the evil face. Relevant comments. What did the poster look like? Can you share a photo? I knew it. MODOK and Ego really have scary faces. Another guess, Annihilus? I just couldn't remember the name. When my husband hung that poster, I already felt it would scare him someday. There really were some grim faces. When my son was a baby, I put Mickey Mouse and Friends stickers over the changing table, and he was terrified maybe because of the eyes. Had to remove them. When he started preschool, I bought him pajamas with a polar bear face, but the eyes looked threatening. So he was scared. I used a black marker to round off the eyes and drew softer, lowered eyebrows. Proud of that fix to this day. Author, yeah, I also think it's better to avoid faces and eyes in kids' room decor. My son still has a big Mario poster where Mario and Luigi are looking sideways. They look straight, but it doesn't scare him at all. Plus, he loves Mario and Luigi, who are the complete opposite of scary characters. That's all for now. Thank you for listening to this story till the end. Don't forget to follow our channel and take care.